Nunca sabemos qué está pasando. No tenemos una sensación permanente de hogar. Nuestras familias están divididas. Nuestros amigos están divididos. Se llevan todo nuestro dinero. No poseemos nada y tenemos que aceptarlo. Y eso es tan rancio como la IA puede ser, porque eso es lo que es. Es un mundo de IA donde eventualmente ponen cosas en nuestros cuerpos para hacernos algo distinto a humanos, algo diferente a humanos. Es la carrera más antigua que existe, porque en realidad, fundamentalmente, es la carrera hacia la inmortalidad. Esto es hacia lo que ellos se dirigen. Quieren llegar ahí. Así que su mundo es uno en el que ellos son dioses y nosotros no tenemos nada.
Bienvenidos, queridos amigos. Bueno, estamos listos para arrancar. Todos hemos sido testigos de este escándalo de depravación que envuelve pues a las élites que nos quieren decir cómo debemos vivir aparte, ¿no? Y algo podemos concluir, que es que estos archivos Epstein pues no son eventos aislados de hombres poderosos que se descarrilaron. Esto es mucho más grave. Estamos frente a una red sistemática, perfectamente organizada de hecho, y operativa, de décadas. Esto no es de 5 años. Hay evidencia clara de secuestros, de trata de personas, de violaciones sistemáticas de menores, de prácticas extremas que van más allá de lo imaginable. Incluso aquellos que parecen limpios en los documentos no lo son porque sean inocentes. Simplemente aún no han sido, digamos que, admitidos del todo en el núcleo más depravado. Están como en la antesala. Es una operación de tal magnitud que no se sostiene sola, pues, ¿no? Es imposible. Y durante décadas esa red contó, pues, con la protección activa de los servicios de inteligencia de Estados Unidos, de Reino Unido, de Israel. No es una teoría conspirativa. Es una aplicación lógica a todo esto. Sabemos que los vuelos de Epstein aterrizaban y despegaban en bases aéreas como la de la Real Fuerza Aérea Británica. Pasó en Colombia, pasó en muchos lugares donde eran recibidos como prácticamente jefes de Estado, sin la prensa, básicamente. Entonces, esta gente mantenía correspondencia directa con importantes, entre paréntesis importantes, relevantes miembros de la élite. Lo vimos con Ariane de Rothschild en el 2014. Bueno, ni hablar de todo de toda la relación que tenía él con todos los dueños hoy de corporaciones y políticos, ¿no? Y ahí se hablaba, pues con Rothschild se hablaba abiertamente de las oportunidades que abriría el levantamiento en Ucrania. Con Emmanuel Macron, ya como presidente, este hombre recurrió, Macron, a Epstein para asesoramiento sobre políticas de Francia, Europa. Y lo protegían. Esos mismos servicios de inteligencia, aparte que lo protegían, recopilaban meticulosamente material comprometedor de todos los participantes. Y el resultado, que es pues una infraestructura transatlántica de chantaje perfecta, una herramienta de control total sobre las élites, y no solamente las élites políticas, las financieras, las mediáticas, de todo el mundo occidental. Y ese delito compartido, por supuesto, que genera dependencia. El silencio se convierte, ¿no?, como una condición para tú poder ascender. Trump lo entendió. De hecho, en su campaña 2024 prometió destapar esos archivos como el núcleo de la putrefacción moral de las élites. Decía que había que hacerlo. Pero claro, cuando lo hizo, abrió una ventana de Overton que estaba sellada, entre paréntesis, y luego legitimó muchas cosas, ¿no? Se dijeron muchas cosas en voz alta, de lo que muchos sospechaban. Que la clase gobernante, pues, no solamente es corrupta, sino que está enferma, pues, tiene una patología muy profunda, muy enferma. Y el arma se le volvió en contra a Trump, ¿no? El escándalo ahora fue utilizado también para arrastrarlo al mismo pantano, demostrar que todos están sucios. Y de hecho sí es así. Y hoy en 2026, pues el caso resurge con una fuerza precisamente porque las fracturas internas dentro de las propias élites son visibles y hay una lucha, pues ahí. Hay una facción de esas élites que está dispuesta a destruir a la otra y según todas las señales que vemos, pues detrás está el interés de los sectores de inteligencia británico, israelí, que quieren acelerar el desgaste de Trump, ¿no? El resultado aquí es claro, esos archivos están contribuyendo directamente al deterioro político de los Estados Unidos, de Trump, y quizás podría terminar acelerando una caída electoral importante. Ya no es un tema solo de escándalos sexuales, es una radiografía más cruda del verdadero funcionamiento del poder en Occidente, amigos. Un sistema que digo que sostiene todo, pues un conjunto de elementos en base al chantaje, a esa transgresión, a la violación hecha ritual y a la protección institucional. Sin embargo, a mí lo que más me preocupa es la ingeniería social que está detrás de Epstein y de todos sus efectos en el futuro. Por eso les quiero traer esta entrevista que hicimos hace un tiempo con Johnny Vedmore, que es especialista de los mejores en estos temas. Y bueno, por supuesto no me quiero ir sin dejarlos en la entrevista sin decirle, bueno, que evidentemente lo que estamos viendo también, pienso que forma parte de una especie de sobre todo la desclasificación de esta segunda tanda de archivos. Pareciera que evidentemente pues es una operación psicológica prácticamente, que está siendo orquestada por esas fracciones que están enfrentadas dentro de la propia élite, dentro del Estado profundo. Hablo de inteligencia, agencias de inteligencia, del lobby militar sionista, hablo del Departamento de Estado, del Departamento de Justicia, pues, ¿no? De la Casa Blanca, de Wall Street, de la City de Londres. Porque fíjense, es una filtración parcial, bien censurada de hecho, que lo que busca es como que generar confusión, mezclar hechos verdaderos con mentiras, con desinformación, y aplicar pues esa táctica de confundir a todo el mundo. Que nadie pueda distinguir entre la verdad y la mentira. También estamos en eso. Y nos deja de alguna manera como que indefensos, ¿no? Ante el control de la élite, porque todo el mundo está confundido. En todo caso, me interesa que veamos esta entrevista con Johnny Vedmore porque él es uno de los pocos investigadores independientes que viene trabajando esto con tiempo, pero sobre todo viéndolo hacia cuál es el fin, la meta final realmente de estas élites. Él ha entendido la relación de Epstein con todos estos personajes de las élites occidentales. Y, repito, él explica allí que Epstein actúa como un nodo central, como un financiador clave, a través de lo que llaman el edge.org, ¿no? Que es la red de Vedmore, ¿no? Que también investigó, ¿no? Entonces, y habla de que estamos hablando de una red tecnocrática con raíces y profundas en los programas de inteligencia, lo hemos dicho, principalmente la CIA, de hecho, dice Johnny Vedmore. Y conecta él con las figuras como Elon Musk, como Jeff Bezos, como Peter Thiel, entre otros magnates, en lo que es una agenda planificada de control total. Klaus Schwab le llama el stakeholder capitalism, ¿no? Que es el capitalismo de los stakeholders, donde las élites deciden todo. Que las personas, nosotros vivamos en un panóptico digital constante, que no tengamos nada realmente, por eso es que dicen el famoso no tendrás nada y serás feliz, y que estemos permanentemente vigilados y manipulados a través de algoritmos. Es la famosa teoría del notch, es la psicología conductual. Y por supuesto mucha propaganda para que nosotros aceptemos las divisiones artificiales, que si Trump es bueno, que si Trump es malo, ¿sabe? Que si Maduro es bueno, que si Maduro es malo, que si Xi Jinping es el malo y Trump y los gringos son los buenos. Aparte, para que aceptemos las crisis fabricadas. Y, más preocupantemente, para que no nos demos cuenta que estamos perdiendo progresivamente la esencia de nuestra humanidad. Él ahí, Johnny Vedmore, detalla ahí cómo Elon Musk participó en los cursos de Epstein, financiados sobre el tema de manipulación psicológica. Él fue a unos cursos en el 2008. También asistió a unos de genómica sintética, todo el tema de transhumanismo, en el 2009, que de hecho se hicieron en las oficinas de SpaceX en su momento, días después de la salida de prisión de Epstein. Y él vincula esto con lo que hablamos, un proyecto más amplio de ingeniería social, que lo que busca es reprogramar al ser humano como código informático para lograr la inmortalidad elitista, mientras se usa pues la migración masiva, las distracciones como cortinas de humo, para ocultar pues la verdadera transición hacia una sociedad poshumana, controlada por unos pocos dioses tecnológicos. Yo espero que esta entrevista la puedas utilizar, que te pueda servir de mucho para entender la gravedad del tema, más allá del chisme político, que es importante, pero no es lo esencial. Entonces quiero que nos concentremos en esto. Saludos a todos los que están ahí conectados. Los voy a dejar con la entrevista y ojalá que la puedan ver completa y puedan compartirla, puedan pasarla, porque este tipo de entrevistas son las que realmente tienen importancia para lo que quieren hacer de cara al futuro. Hablamos transhumanismo, panóptico digital. Veamos entonces lo que nos decía Johnny Vedmore.
Nunca sabemos qué está pasando. No tenemos una sensación permanente de hogar. Nuestras familias están divididas. Nuestros amigos están divididos. Se llevan todo nuestro dinero. No poseemos nada y tenemos que aceptarlo. Y eso es tan rancio como la IA puede ser, porque eso es lo que es. Es un mundo de IA donde eventualmente ponen cosas en nuestros cuerpos para hacernos algo distinto a humanos, algo diferente a humanos. Es la carrera más antigua que existe, porque en realidad, fundamentalmente, es la carrera hacia la inmortalidad. Esto es hacia lo que ellos se dirigen. Quieren llegar ahí. Así que su mundo es uno en el que ellos son dioses y nosotros no tenemos nada.
Bienvenidos amigos, hoy vamos a conversar con el investigador británico Johnny Vedmore sobre cómo figuras poderosas como Elon Musk y Jeffrey Epstein están involucradas en esas redes de control psicológico y en el globalismo que afectan tanto la libertad individual y la sociedad en general. En un mundo donde la tecnología, la inteligencia artificial, estas unidades de empujones psicológicos que llaman nudge, se usan para manipular comportamientos masivos, pues entender estas conexiones ayudan a exponer esas conspiraciones que erosionan la democracia, que promueven el tecnocratismo y que facilitan un panóptico digital, algo que le tenemos mucho temor. Les comento que Johnny Vedmore es un periodista, investigador independiente, él es británico, especializado en periodismo profundo y análisis históricos, y es el fundador del sitio web newpace.com, donde publica artículos bien extensos sobre temas como el globalismo, la manipulación psicológica, las redes de poder y figuras controvertidas como las de las que vamos a hablar hoy, Jeffrey Epstein, Elon Musk, Eric Weinstein. De manera que será una muy buena presa. Su trabajo se basa en investigaciones detalladas que conectan eventos pasados con dinámicas actuales y ha producido series bien interesantes como la Epstein 101 y The Musk Files, que les recomiendo las vean. Él es muy conocido por su enfoque pues, en revelar conexiones ocultas entre estas élites tecnocráticas, políticas y de inteligencia, y siempre promoviendo pues, un periodismo independiente, financiado básicamente por donaciones. La entrevista está en inglés, ya tiene los subtítulos integrados, así que puedes desactivar los subtítulos de YouTube para que no te estorben, ¿ok? O puedes también incluso activar la pista de audio en español, que seguramente va a estar disponible desde el icono de engranaje. Ahí pasas, haces clic en audio, luego haces clic en español. Y si las quieres ver en inglés, también puedes ajustar la velocidad, digamos, para que hagas una mejor lectura de los subtítulos. Ve al símbolo de engranaje, ahí le vas a hacer clic en velocidad de reproducción y selecciona una más lenta, puede ser 0.75x. Te recuerdo, para evitar subtítulos duplicados, desactiva los genéricos de YouTube en el icono de subtítulos donde dice CC y apágalos por completo. Así que empezamos. Before diving into the specific and concrete topics, Johnny, after so much research and reading on these issues, tell me how you think the world they want to impose on us will be like. The Elon Musk, the Peter Thiel, the Alex Karps, the Epsteins, those guys. I want your interpretation of where they want to take us and how they want us to live.
Okay, I can do that. Thanks for having me. Listen, there's a world that's been mapped out and planned. Detail is already online. You can already go and look. You can already see the slides, see the training slides. Organizations like the World Economic Forum, which of course derived from CIA programs, and like Kissinger's International Seminar, which Klaus Schwab went through and was given mentors to go back and create this world. This really has been mapped out and planned by many different organizations, not just them, but you can see they're working, and their working is something. The Pareto distribution, the way capitalism works means all wealth rises to the top, and they knew this. They know this. When they're looking at the issues that capitalism was going to face in the future, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, they were saying, how can we overcome this issue? How can we get past this issue? All of that wealth will rise to the top. Well, what we got to do is make a political philosophy that suits that world and that dynamic. So we get to keep all of the money at the top, and all of the people underneath can own nothing, and we can watch them all the time because we like watching people. The government loves to watch you. They like your information, and that's because information is everything. You know, you get there's a theory came from Norbert Wiener's cybernetics information theory. You know, the flow of information backwards and forwards is really important. So the world they want to create, your question, the answer to that, the world they want to create is a world of stakeholder capitalism, where the wealthiest in society make decisions and give us the false illusion that we're making decisions. We're pressing buttons and saying, we want to decide one of these 4 options, and all 4 options are given to you by the same people and will lead you in the same direction. This is a world of illusion that they create. And for a world of illusion to exist, they must have the propaganda streams, pumping out the right information to make you want this. You will want to own nothing and be happy. You will want to sit inside the digital panopticon. For people who don't know, a panopticon was a prison that was designed by a man called Jeremy Bentham. It is all of the cells go in a circle around one central guard tower, and that guard gets to watch everybody, all of the cells. They can see them all at the same time, but no prisoner knows whether or not they're being observed. So they change their psychology to behave themselves. And this is the digital panopticon, where we are all observed. Our minute detail, our data, our information is fed through AI algorithms that allow them to take out all of the important facts about how we live our lives and the routines. And we are creatures of habit as human beings, the routines we exist in every day, and they want to control those. They want to manipulate those. They want everything that has wealth attached to it to be going towards them, and they want to make sure that everything where people get angry or where people want to revolt, that they can use subterfuge, use coercion to change our psychology, use behavioral insights, use nudge theory that Richard Thaler invented. They want to push us in one direction. It's into a cell. It's into a jail cell that becomes our home, where we know we're being watched all the time, where we own nothing, and everything is automated to be successful for those who are up the top and not for us. And when we complain and when we say anything about it, what they will do is they will divide us over and over again with loads of different political issues that suddenly come up and spring up, with migration crisis that they themselves make and create. You can look at the root of every crisis that we have in the world right now, and it goes back to some intelligence agency operation. So what they want to create is a world where we never know what's going on. We have no permanent feeling of home. Our families are divided. Our friends are divided. They take all of our money, and we own nothing, and we have to accept it. And that is it is as stale as AI gets, because that's what it is. It's a world of AI where eventually they put things in our bodies to make us something else than human, something other than human. It's the race, it's the oldest race in the book as well, because really, fundamentally, it's the race to immortality. This is what they're going towards. They want to get there. So their world is one where they are gods and we have nothing.
Wow. And how did you, Johnny, how do you discover the connection between Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein through this Epstein-funded third culture program?
Right. Well, I was really surprised that no one else had actually reported on it, because when I was looking through Edge was created by John Brockman. It was from something called the Reality Club that existed in the 80s in New York elite scientific circles. People like Richard Dawkins and others Daniel Dennett and many other very famous scientists would get together in New York clubs in the very elite circles, and they would talk about the future, about merging the two cultures, the cultures of the arts and humanities and the cultures of science together. They're very separate groups. There's a book called The Two Cultures that was written in 1957 or 1959 that was basically posited that people who are scientists don't understand the works of Shakespeare, and the people who are artists don't understand the second law of thermodynamics. So there's a cross in culture where they don't mix and they don't understand each other. And there's always been a desire to combine those into a third culture, a culture that combines the two would control everything. And this is what people like Brockman believed. And they created this, Brockman created this organization called the Reality Club. It became Edge. Edge soon, in the late 90s, was involving Epstein. Epstein was soon funding it, the majority of it, 90% of it, and then it went up to 100% funding. And so once I discovered years ago about Edge, many people know about Edge, it's where all of the top technocrats, all of the top scientists, all of their people like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates and others all came together to look at the world of technology and see what the future looked like, and try and use that technology and use their skills to work together to make that technocracy exist. So it's the development of the technocracy, and Jeffrey Epstein knew how important that was and started funding it and mixing and mingling with these these elite scientists. So elite scientists would go to his island as well, as we know, people like Steven Pinker, and they would hang around and they would have a great time and they would all party. They probably weren't sleeping with young girls or doing any of the compromised stuff. There was no necessity for it. They were all friends. They were all looking for the same interest, and that is to get power through science and to make science powerful again. You know, there is an innocence to that as well. The people who were involved who see this world of the future and they want to create it. Well, Epstein funded this world, and he hung around with these people. And following that lead, you soon find that there was a long list of names of the top technocrats who were involved in this. And one of them was Elon Musk. In 2008, he took part in a course at Edge. It's called an Edge Masterclass. These were put on by the best in their field. At this time, this Edge Masterclass was put on by a guy called Richard Thaler, that's Thaler, and Sendif Mulinafan. Both of these men were very, very, I mean, Nudge, a book had just come out. Richard Thaler had written it with Cass Sunstein, and what it did, it looked at behavioral psychology, behavioral insights, and how to manipulate and nudge people's behavior, what they call nudge, just push people's behavior so that they will do what those in power want without knowing they're being nudged. So this was done in COVID, for instance. In COVID, people were told in the UK government, their nudge unit that came from this, I mean, this is literally incorporated into government now. We're making people in the UK feel disgust for people who wouldn't accept the vaccination. So if people are disgusted in you, your friends and family are disgusted in you, you're more likely to change your behavior. So this course in 2008 was how to manipulate behavior, run by the man who was the grandfather of behavioral insights and psychological manipulation. Some of the fourth part of this course, it was a 6-day course. Elon Musk attended 4 parts, including the psychology of scarcity, which is about how to use poverty to manipulate people. One of the overarching points of this course in particular, this masterclass, was how to use, and it was only 12 people involved in it, people like Jeff Bezos and Salah Kamango, who was the head of YouTube at one time, and of course Elon Musk, the tippity top, the heads, the main people who were in charge of these big social media companies and who would be in charge of social media companies in the future were learning how to manipulate people's behavior by using social media. So the people, this is Jeffrey Epstein funding someone who's trained in psychological manipulation, training Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and other people, the heads of these companies, on how to use their platforms to manipulate our psychology without us knowing. Now, once I discovered that, once I had gone, it's all up there. This isn't a conspiracy theory. Edge.org is a website you can go to. You can see the masterclass. You can read about what it's about. You can read the minutes, exact minutes to every single part of that training course, the questions from people like Elon Musk and the responses back. You can see pictures of it. You can watch a video of the presentation being given, and you can hear all the audio and see them speaking. It's not a conspiracy. It exists. You can watch it for yourself. And once I saw all of this and realized they're all talking about Jeffrey Epstein out there, they're all talking about all of his crimes, but nobody's talking about this. Why? When it's one of the most important things. This should be everywhere. When I put out that article, the first article about Musk and Epstein, I was just astounded that no one had found it so far. This is something that repeats within my work, because I learned that the most of the media is bought and paid for. In actual fact, lots of media institutes were involved in Edge themselves. In one of my last articles about Trump and Epstein's relationship, I list out over 50 journalists working for New York Times, Washington Post, whatever, all around the place, who are going and attending Edge on a regular basis and buddying up with all these people, becoming friends with all these technocrats and reporting how wonderful they are, how brilliant they are. When in actual fact, in 2009, the next year, Elon Musk gets involved in another Jeffrey Epstein-funded course at Edge, but this time, Elon Musk co-hosts it at SpaceX itself. And it's on synthetic genomics, how to become transhuman, how the future, what they envision. And this is 2009. It happens. It's funded. I asked Grok. I had to argue with Elon Musk's own AI platform. I asked, was this true? And they had to admit, after I gave all of the evidence, they had to admit that Jeffrey Epstein funded Edge $50,000 that year, which included co-hosting at SpaceX a training course on synthetic genomics, which Elon Musk attended. You can see the attendance. Again, you see all the photos, you see all the information about it. It's not a conspiracy theory at all. It is a conspiracy. And you look at the people who were there, there's people like Ari Emanuel, the people who are going to be, who are not just scientists, they're part of the entertainment industry. There's people there who are big journalists. And Jeffrey Epstein had already, at this point, been convicted for sex crimes against a child. And he was released from prison a day and a half before this training course took place. A day and a half, not a year, not a month, a day and a half after Epstein is released from prison for abusing a child, Elon Musk is co-hosting a course that's funded by him. And again, no one reports it. You've got even the top people on the independent media, the top people on the mainstream media, no one is reporting. All the evidence is there. No one is reporting it because they're owned by the exact people who have been putting on the course, who are involved. Jeffrey Epstein himself, as I explained in the last Trump and Epstein to catch and kill a mockingbird, they caught and killed stories. They were buying the media. Trump was paying the media to kill stories. Epstein was buying, but entering into consortiums and trying to buy parts of the media that were running articles about him, alongside Harvey Weinstein and others. Just before this period, 2004, 2005, they were involved in that. And these happened in 2008, 2009. There's a definite, this isn't just superficial evidence. This isn't just a picture here or a rumor. This is everywhere. This is information. This is data. This is definite. This is videos. This is minutes to the meeting. This is undeniable corruption.
Johnny, I know you talk about it, but I want to go, I don't know, perhaps to the ABC of this. What exactly does the psychological manipulation training that figures like Musk and Bezos receive at edge.org consist of? Exactly, can you explain us like an ABC?
Okay, so I mean, nudge technology. There's a lot of things you see when you actually listen to when you read the minutes to the meetings, when you hear, because you can watch videos to every one of the SpaceX ones as well, apart from one, which has been taken away because I think it's transhumanism and they don't want to talk about it at all, because they're just admitting that they're going to have to change humans and they're going to have to experiment on humans for that. The first thing is that for them, they see themselves as creating this world and creating algorithms that will change people's behavior. Understanding nudge units and understanding the level of psychological manipulation that they use for nudging, for pushing people psychologically, you've got to understand where behavioral insights come from. Because if we were 30 years ago, the CIA were using this sort of technology to manipulate people, and they were doing it in hiding because the press would have said, no, that's unacceptable. Epstein and Bezos and Salakamanga are sitting in training courses with the heads of behavioral insights, and they're saying stuff like this. They're saying, like with the psychology of scarcity, they're being told, hey, this is almost word for word what Sendil Molnathan opens up the fourth day of the 2008 Edge Masterclass. He says, poverty is bad. Poverty is bad. He's looking at Elon Musk. He's looking at Jeff Bezos. He's looking at Salakamanga. He's looking at Hillman. He's looking at all these guys. He's saying poverty is awful. It's loads of bad things. But there's a lot of interest in psychology to be found in poverty that we can use. And we can use that, of course, for the benefit to push people and nudge people into having the right behaviors. And the right behaviors is behaviors that the rich and wealthy elite want, which is control and silence, coercion, manipulation, keeping people in a box, of course. But for us, when we listen to them speak, they're using words that can flip around like this. They're using their words carefully. They have double meanings. Oh, it's so sad. The poor people are so sad. But if we just, we nudge them, use nudging, we use psychological, we'll say something about how, they should be, their poverty is due to this, or their poverty is because of this. Then they'll stop doing the thing. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's whether we can give people something that will nudge their behavior without them knowing. I think that's the important thing. It's without them knowing. Now, when you look at how that's developed over the years, what they're actually doing is they're training these people who are going to be responsible for deciding the algorithms that are used to chain us all. They're training them on how to use those algorithms to nudge our behavior. So what do we see on X? What do we see on Amazon? What do we see on all of these sites, Facebook, on YouTube? We see them showing us the things they want to show us and hiding the things they don't want us to see. And this is really what it is. It's the words are how to manipulate situations without saying you're manipulating. Behavioral insight is put forward as libertarian paternalism. So like you're a parent for these libertarians. So no one's, it's a contradiction. You can't have a libertarian who's being told what to do by the parents. You can't have a parent libertarian relationship, but that's what they call it, paternal libertarianism. It's a way to say, you're still free. You're still free. They're teaching people how to say, you're still free, but all you're seeing is what makes you make decisions. So people who are on social media, what they see, they don't realize that 99% of their decisions are based on saying, oh, I've seen that, I like that. I've seen that, I like that. I've seen that, I don't like that. So what is that? Oh, it's an advert that says Trump good. Oh, it's an advert, Trump bad. Oh, it's an advert, Trump good. In the right situation, given enough of those adverts, eventually you'll just say whatever the most adverts will give you. They know that. They just have to rephrase things. There's one of the interesting things they did, especially the behavioral insight team. I did a lot of research into the behavioral insight team because both Obama and Cameron welcomed them into government. In actual fact, the behavioral insight team of Richard Thaler, just around this time this course was happening, they've been accepted in the White House and Downing Street as well. In Britain, it was the first time they created a behavioral insight team, a nudge unit. And it was the first ever time that a private business had been incorporated with a government business, that there'd been a partnership. Never in history has that allowed that a Whitehall department could be a private entity as well. And eventually they just made them private because it's too hard to attach these guys to government and get away with it. Because the fact is, what you're doing is manipulating people psychologically. You're using they are looking at every single stat, all your data. So your information, again, information theory, the information you're giving out is the information they use to chain you. They want to chain you. The idea is they want to put you in handcuffs. They want to put you in that cell, in the digital panopticon, and you can't move out of there. So how do they do that? Well, they manipulate you. They tell you what to think. They tell you what to feel. And we as humans, I'm the same as everyone else. We are creatures of our surroundings, of our habitat. We believe some people and we don't believe other people. And soon, if they know who you believe and they know who you don't believe, they just get who you believe to say the right things to you. So they pay people. And we now live in a world where influencers exist, and that's fine. That's acceptable. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if someone said, oh, that guy's trying to influence you, you would have gone, oh, that's unacceptable. I don't want to be influenced. I want to make my own decisions. But now it's like we call them influencers, and it's the language has changed. Nudge units, that's psychological warfare unit. Nudge unit means psychological warfare. Libertarian paternalism means tyranny. They all are just reforming. Influencers means nice guy who's there for your best interest and there to tell you what's really going on. All of these things are created. They're redefining words. And I think there's an element that people have to understand. Spelling. In English, we say to spell with words. We spell a word out. And spell, of course, is to cast a spell, to cast an illusion, magic in the mind. And I think there's a load of that. They use words, they change the words, and then they feed those words back to you in a mimetic fashion, constantly hitting you in the face with it until you believe it, whether you like it or not. So I know rational, logical people who will ignore logic because a person who they like says something. That's it. That's what all they need to do.
Wow, it's incredible. And now I understand why do you believe that these nudge units represent a threat to individual freedom in this digital age. My question is, they replace Hollywood? They're more efficient, they're more tactical, or they're still using things like Hollywood?
Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so I'll explain first something about an infamous party that the elites have called Bohemian Grove. Everybody knows it. Happens down by the Russian River. Everybody goes, and it's split into 3 camps. There's 3 campsites. There are the Bohemians, there are the government guys, and there's the academics. and they all sit in their little camps and they all have fun, and then they do plays together. They dress up as women. All the men, it's no women at all the men just run around being silly. And Bohemian Grove was a very clever idea. If you go back to the 1800s, and I talk about this a lot, there's a woman called Alice Ricks who was writing for the San Francisco Examiner, and she wrote an article about Bohemian Grove where she described something that was really just, it made all of society make sense. The academic man, he decides what society looks like. They decide it in the public policy institutes. He decides it in the university. He decides it in colleges. He understands loads of things. He gives that to the government man. He says, society is to be run like this, and the government man takes it. But the government man is the least trusted person in the world. So he can't go to people and say, here you go, the academic man told me that you need to live like this. Your society needs to look like this. No one's going to listen. So the academic gives their plans to the government, and the government gives it to the bohemian, the actor, the musician, the people who can touch your heart and touch your soul and touch your head in return, and they sell it. The academic gives the government man how to run society, and the government man gives that to the actors, gives that to the comedians, gives that to the musicians, and they go out and sell it. Now, what you allude to there is the times of Lou Wasserman, whose grandson, Casey Wasserman, was an Epstein associate and is now involved in Trump White House, of course. But Lou Wasserman once ran Hollywood. He was one of the main men. He was influencing. He had connections with all of the deep state mechanisms that allowed them to do those sort of operations where they got free reign, and at the same time the government got to put propaganda right in the face. They made movies, and they funded movies that the government wanted made at the time. They went to Hollywood and they said, sell our ideas to the people, put them in the movies, put them everywhere. And that worked for a while. But then we started to open up our eyes and we started to see it happening. And people talked about it for decades, through the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We're going, Hollywood's trying to put things in our mind. By the time we're old, by the time it's the millennium, we're going, oh yeah, of course Hollywood, of course TV tries to put things in your mind. But also later on, because when that started to fail, they did the same with musicians. Musicians always had influence. Of course, you had during World War II, Latin America, South America were a risk for the United States of America. Nazis could infiltrate South America, and that was worrying. So what they did is they sent loads of people down there, like Bing Crosby and many other singers, and they did loads of shows, and it was a Nelson Rockefeller funded program that was to get the South Americans to love America via the media that they love, via songs, via movies, via all of the things that sell it to you, that reach your heart. So they did that with the movies. They did that with music very much. So they started to implant it. It got to the point with music that we got P. Diddy parties happening where all of the musicians come around, they're all covering themselves in oil, and they're doing freak-off parties. I don't know how you say that in Spanish, but where they're twerking and the likes. So that happens, but people start to see, look, the musicians are putting things in our mind too. The musicians, they don't, like the punks of yesterday, the people who were called themselves punks, all sold out during the pandemic. They all said, oh yeah, take it. So they all sold out. And we see this. So we stopped caring about movies. We stopped believing films. We stopped believing the musicians, and we stopped believing the music. So now they've gone down to Austin. Musk basing his businesses in Austin. Thiel basing his businesses in Austin. Austin becomes central. Also, the Austin comedy scene is being pushed by the exact same people. So you've got the Joe Rogan of the world, who, of course, they start to have the Kill Tonys based now in Austin. The biggest podcasts in the world are going to be there. The biggest, the center of comedy is going there. And the reason why the center of comedy is going to Austin, Texas, is because no one believes the musicians anymore. No one believes the actors anymore. Now they've run through those. They're going through the comedians. So now the comedians, you watch Kill Tony, it's just a political show. Putting political, every third or fourth act is talking about Trump and Biden. Trump's a hero and Biden's an idiot. That's what they're doing. They're using the comedians now. Once that's run through, they'll go probably back to the actors again. The fact is that these people, the bohemians, as we call them, the people of the arts and humanities, they're the people who capture our heart. And they've been using those guys for 100, 200, 1,500 years, who knows, 15,000 years. I would say you go back to ancient Mesopotamia and everybody is listening to what the guy on the street who's entertaining them is saying. He's going, yeah, I agree with that. Down with King Hammurabi or whatever. Society is driven by laughter, joy, and love. And that laughter, joy, and love must be co-opted and manipulated by the most evil people who want to run society, but they've got no ideas. So they got to get the guys who have all the ideas, give them the ideas, give them to those artists, and those artists go out, sell it to the world.
Johnny, and what is Eric Weinstein's role in these networks, and how does it relate to globalism and UN design migration?
It's amazing. I was really interested in the intellectual dark web, partially due to Joe Rogan. Of course, I'm watching Joe Rogan, and then I start to see these different people come up. There's a debate happening about what is man and what is a woman, and we were all very interested. And the people who were behind it became known as were central to that debate, or became central to that debate, were called the intellectual dark web. Eventually, they were the likes of Jordan B. Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Joe Rogan, Eric Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, etc., etc. And I started to look at each one of those individually, because once I put my faith in somebody, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to check who you are. Because that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't just be going, I love them blindly. We should say, I love them. Now let me check they're the real people that they say they are, and then I'll love them even more if they are. And I started to look into each of them, and I found each of them very interesting. But Eric Weinstein, in about 2019, I came across, first of all, Eric Weinstein's previous role for the UN. I found a website. Eric Weinstein had a website, but on the archives, there was another Eric Weinstein website. So I went to that one, and you could go back into the past and see that in the early 2000s, he was writing papers for some very interesting people that he doesn't mention on his later website, doesn't mention in his Wikipedia page, doesn't mention anywhere else. And when I looked back and saw what he was writing, well, he was writing papers for J.P. Morgan at one point, which is very interesting. That's the same time that Epstein was heavily involved with J.P. Morgan. So maybe they met, because he did say that he met him in an office once. He says, Eric Weinstein says he met Epstein and he didn't really trust him. But I think he knew Epstein for a long time, because Eric Weinstein was involved in Edge from 2009-10, after Epstein's got out of prison, all of the way to 2018-19. So 10 years in deep involvement in Edge. He would have met Epstein on a number of occasions. So number one, I didn't think he was telling the truth. I had looked at a lot of what he was saying. He seemed to be manipulating things. And I found this one paper that he worked on between 2000 and 2002, which was called Migration for the Benefit of All. It was written by him for the Migrant Division, that's all capital letters, Migrant Division of the UN. Mm-hmm. And what the paper basically says, I mean, if I was to paraphrase it, it analyzes migration, economic migration everywhere, like a globalist institution like the United Nations would want, and like we're seeing now. And it analyzes what will happen during such migration. Because obviously they're saying this is the model we want. What are the pitfalls? And Eric Weinstein spends 2 years working for the United Nations to work out what it looks like, the positives and benefits. And he calls it migration for the benefit of all. the one main note I want to put about, because number one, he's Eric Weinstein has posed himself of late over the past 10 years. He's positioned himself as an anti-establishment, anti-globalist to an extent. He is the CEO of Thiel Capital. He's one of the heads of Peter Thiel's organizations. Under his watch, they've been funding AI drone technology, which benefits both the Ukrainian front and the Israeli front. So he's helping with the war. He's helping to perpetuate warfare on behalf of one of the most evil people in the world. So looking back and looking at that paper, when I read it, I'm thinking, what is there that is of interest? And one of the main notes that I found about it was he comes to a conclusion that there will be such pressure that what has happened, the native population, the wages will be lowered. And the incoming migrants will, of course, have a better quality of living. But that better quality of living from the migrants lowers the native population's standard of living. And he says in it, at some point, that's going to cause a load of anger. So we've got to remedy that. And I'm sure that something will happen later on that is currently unknown that will change it. So that's it. That's his plan, was look, all of this was all the negatives, this was all the positive. All of this negative stuff, well, we can do it. We'll do this, whatever, and something will happen that'll change it eventually. He gives no solution. And that really was just, I mean, that was the most shocking part of the paper. Not all of the contradiction, not all of the everything that you know about Eric Weinstein being contradicted, but was that the idea behind the paper was to find solutions. And his solution was, well, when it comes to the time, we'll work something out. We're clever. And that's it. And that is what the migrant policy, the current migration policy of the UN, or the migration policy Eric Weinstein was writing, looks exactly like what we got now. So what we're seeing on the streets, we're seeing unfettered migration to the West. I know this in my own community. If I complain about migration, I'm going to be called a racist or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But outside, my whole area is now Indian, Black, and Arabic on the majority. And it wasn't like that just 10 years ago. That's happened. It's been pushed that way. If you look at the figures of immigration, it's doubled year on year. It's exponential growth. They're changing our entire societies. Now, whether I like that or not, it lowers my potential wages. And as the technocracy takes away more and more jobs, what they see is, people won't realize it's, we can blame it on all of these other things. Well, the technocracy steals all of their money. While stakeholder capitalism takes the last of what they have. While we, the people in power create the you'll own nothing and be happy world that they want to create. Well, they can go look outside, point outside and say, oh, look, it's all of those immigrants. And what we're seeing happening, we're seeing Elon Musk pushing out now. He's pushing out. Oh yes, migration. He's boosting up Tommy Robinson, the famous English nationalist. He's inciting the sort of behavior that comes of focusing on that, because they don't want you focusing on the building of the technocracy. They don't want you focusing on Epstein's relationship with Elon Musk. They don't want you focusing on the worst people in society, designing our society, and that's why it looks like this. The same people who created that society, who designed that society, are the same people who are currently saying, look at those migrants, look at those immigrants. Whether you like it or not, whether it lowers your wages or not, it's not those guys' fault. Those guys are being bombed by companies that are being supported by Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Eric Weinstein. They are all making money off the wars in both Gaza and Ukraine. They are made money off the wars in Syria. They have made money off the wars in Iraq. They have made money off the wars in Afghanistan, so on and so forth. They make lots of money in that. That money all flows to them. All of those migrants are left without homes. Of course they're going to move. They're given passage to move. They're brought into the country, often bus loads, plane loads. They come into this country, they got nothing. It lowers everybody's wages, just like Eric Weinstein said. And what happens, Eric Weinstein, if I want to say directly to him? I know he's blocked me on Twitter now, so he might not hear my voice. But Eric, mate, there's nothing happening that's going to change this. There is no magic thing that's suddenly coming up to change this. This is an operation designed by the same people you exist with within an echo chamber that is the only echo chamber that most people are allowed to see. Because that's what's happening. At the top, these people, Musk, Thiel, Weinstein, all of these guys, Mencius Moba, Curtis Yarvin, they get to design our society and they show it to us and they tell us that's all we're going to get. And we keep going towards that. There's so much more. There's so many more possibilities that aren't designed via Epstein-funded programs, but we're not being shown them.
Johnny, how do you see the Epstein influence on the political leaders like Trump, like Clinton, and why do you think he's a globalist weapon?
Ooh, it's a complicated. I believe Trump is a manufactured dialectic antithesis. He's the opposing force to what the Democratic Party wanted to project. You know, he looks like the opposite, doesn't he? He smells like the opposite. They've surrounded him with people who are like the opposite. But all of these people work together, of course. We know that Clinton and Epstein and Trump all had very close associations, but the political dance there is much more interesting, especially with Trump. I've written about how Epstein and Clinton's relationship was about choosing future Democratic leaders, grooming them and funding them. This is proven. Epstein himself funded everyone from Chuck. He gave money to George H.W. Bush early on, but he also gave money to Chuck Schumer, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Jeff Bingham, Joe Lieberman, Bill Richardson, all of the different people, RFK Jr., all of the different people who could potentially become Democratic Party leaders. Trump is part of this New York elite, a very rich, wealthy New York elite. He is extremely powerful in the 80s already. In 1987, he's writing his book, which is the most famous work of his day, his seminal work called The Art of the Deal. At the same time, he was putting forward that he was interested to be president, and he was a registered Democrat at the time. And which is most people in New York are registered Democrats, really, the majority. And the Republicans come in and said, hey, Trump, why look at those candidates for the Democrats? They're terrible. Why don't you join our force? And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. I might try and run to become Republican leader before George H.W. Bush gets called the Republican leader that year, where gets nominated. He puts himself forward as a possible presidential candidate for the Republicans. Then, of course, George H.W. Bush gets in. He backs him. Trump says, oh, I believe in George H.W. Bush. And then he goes back into the New York elite scene. And this elite scene in New York, you know, they were kingmakers at the time that weren't Trump. The kingmakers were Malcolm Forbes. The kingmakers were people like Robert Maxwell had just moved into New York and was a kingmaker. You know, there was big names in New York who were the real kingmakers at the time. And Trump was small on the scene. He was growing. And over the next 10 years, 15 years, he would form a strong relationship with Epstein. And during that period, he would also have a political journey of his own. This is during the period that where Epstein's funding and training future Democratic Party leaders. So seeing him get close to Trump is very interesting. It suggests he was grooming Trump for leadership, for potentially becoming a Democratic Party leader. 1995, the Reform Party of the United States was created by Ross Perot. That's a really important moment in this as well, because it gave another potential third-party outlet that isn't Republican or isn't Democratic Party. And even though that Trump was very much hanging around in New York elite circles, was hanging around with Democratic kingmakers like the Clintons, like Epstein, it was clear that the Democratic Party were never going to trust Trump. They saw him, they belittled him. They said terrible things about him in the press. They said, they pushed all of his buttons on purpose, we say. They pushed all of his buttons. They made him angry. And by the time it came to 2000 election, he ran for the Reform Party of the United States of America. That was his first little jaunt into politics. The Reform Party of the United States of America, they had been created because an independent during the original Bill Clinton campaign, had got 18.9% of the vote, which is really high amount of the vote. So they finally believed, this is a third party could make it. And Trump went that way. Once he left that, he looked like he was going back in Democratic circles. And he was back with Epstein. But in the early noughties, after the millennium, there was a lot of issue with Trump and Epstein. They were competing for loads of different things. In 2002, a famous Landon Thomas Jr. article came up in the New York Magazine, which Epstein later tried to purchase. And the article was called Jeffrey Epstein, International Money Man of Mystery. It's an infamous article now. It's the one where Trump is quoted in there and Clinton is quoted in there talking about Epstein. And Trump says, I've known Jeffrey for 15 years. He's a fantastic guy. He likes women. He likes them younger than I do. Some of them really young, etc. And that has become infamous, become famous. But around that time was the time where Trump and Epstein started competing on realty. There was the Gosman Island in 2004, 2005. Gosman Island estate was being sold off. Epstein was on one side of the bidding. Trump was on the other side of the bidding. There were other problems, but Epstein was also being investigated by the police for the allegation in 2005. And from that point on, Trump started to distance himself from Epstein. And in 2007, he split with Epstein completely, probably because he was told that Epstein was going to be prosecuted, and he realized that being friends with someone who was a convicted sex offender was going to be negative for his outcome. From that point on, he saw the sign. Donald Trump, you can say anything about him, he sees trends. He sees trends. That's how he's made so much money, by seeing trends. And he saw that the Democratic Party, however much, the Democratic Party in 2005, 2006, they don't realize Barack Obama's around the corner. They don't realize hope and change and all of this, but they're not going to choose Donald Trump as a candidate. There's articles in various big newspapers like the New York Times where people are saying the worst things about Trump at this point, and they're Democrats. They're Democrats who are saying awful things. So Trump is turning away from the Democratic Party. He can see that Jeffrey Epstein was had such an important role in the Democratic Party leadership candidates in choosing them, that there was no point in being anywhere near that party, because once that come out, it was going to go wild. And so he started to slowly change allegiance. And when you say slowly change allegiance, that's hard anyway, because at one point he was a Republican, at one point he was Reform, and he was back Democrat, Republican. Donald Trump, no point in being anywhere near that power, because once that come out, it was going to go wild. And so in that he started to slowly change allegiance, especially. And it led to Donald Trump going over to the Republican Party completely. And I've always felt that what happened with I've said out loud that Donald Trump is one of the people Epstein tried to groom for power in the Democratic Party leadership. And I truly believe that. But I believe also that Trump saw right through it, and he turned against it, and he saw what was going on, and he was ahead of the game in so many ways that he changed over to the other side. And that is, if that's true, that is to his credit. However, it must be said, he originally supported George H.W. Bush in 1987. Jeffrey Epstein was funding George H.W. Bush during that period. George H.W. Bush had formerly been the head of the CIA and was still heavily linked with CIA leadership. They were looking for a way to take over all parties, Republican and Democratic Party. Clinton had been working on things like Contra affair in Mena, Arkansas, when he was government, aligned with the CIA. When Clinton took office, it just looked like the CIA had taken over the Democrat Party. But to be honest, they took over the Democratic Party once they shot out the president's head in 1963 with President Kennedy. There is a real good argument to be said that Donald Trump is an example of a candidate that the Republicans have used to try and manipulate all parties. You know, there is a possibility that in actual fact, Bill Clinton was put into power in the Democratic Party by the Republicans and by the CIA. And that in actual fact, the politics that we think exists that are so easy to understand, the left and right, don't exist anymore, because Bill Clinton was also the first ever third-way politician, something he announced in 1992. He said, I'm not on the left anymore, I'm a centrist. And when you go into the center ground, hey, there's no solution. There's no solution. The solution's all on the left and right. So the center ground of third-way politics means they have to replace that with austerity, war, and fifth-generation warfare. And that's what we see exist now. Personally, from what I've seen, from the evidence I've seen, the CIA took control of America in 1963 when it blew out the head of Kennedy. And since then, every single president has only been allowed into office if he bends the knee to the agency. And that will also include, to some extent, Trump, of course.
And Johnny, talking about the CIA, what role do the CIA and other intelligence agencies play in the social engineering you described in your investigation, and who you think is behind CIA actually?
Okay, well, I mean, the CIA is one of the biggest funded black ops organizations in the world. I mean, their budget is insane. Most of it is black, so you don't know how much they got, but it's more than most governments have got to spend. And if you go back, I followed this very carefully. I went to the creation of the CIA back in 1947. You got people like Kermit Roosevelt, who I've written a lot about. He was the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, third or fourth cousin to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he was one of the ones to first run the coups in Egypt. The first ever coup was in 1952 that the CIA took part in. It was against King Farouk, and it was called Operation Fat Fuck, which is a jaunty name. In 1953, the next year, they took down Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran, and they paid like about $1.5 million to do that. Back in 1953, $1.5 million is a massive amount of money. But Kermit Roosevelt and others, they were, in actual fact, they were very left-wing. They were very liberal in their views. But the CIA wasn't. The CIA was something else. It opposed, even the people who were the heads of the CIA did the opposite to what they think they should do. You know, their actions of over the years show that they went into country after country. This in 1963. The CIA were clearly involved in Kennedy assassination. And for over the next few years, anybody who was dissenting against the state, against the deep state, against what Eisenhower had warned about, were slowly killed one by one. Martin Luther King Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Sr., they died until there was a moment where in 1967 something happened. And this is where we have to start, right? The 6-Day War happens in Israel. What's Israel now? It's Palestine then. It happened in Palestine. And that was fundamentally important before that, the American population had not supported the creation of the State of Israel. The majority of them had not supported it. They felt terribly sad about what had happened in Palestine. After 1967, everybody worked out, now Israel have the stronger hand. And the CIA made a decision to partner with them. For that, they needed a reset, something that happens continuously throughout history. So 1967, suddenly you've got all of these different organizations, media organizations, that are funded by CIA programs, people like organizations like Ramparts Magazine, who are producing, who are releasing loads of facts about it. They're showing Gloria Steinem, the famous feminist, once worked for the CIA. The CIA were running operations to combat communism in youth festivals in Europe. The CIA were funding Kissinger's international seminar that were training young global leaders like Klaus Schwab and others. They were admitting it all. You know, New York Times admitted that as well. Kissinger's international seminar funded by the CIA. Suddenly, the CIA had to have a reset. And they had to have a reset because it'd been discovered that they had been running operations domestically. And it is against the CIA Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America for their intelligence agencies to run operations, surreptitious operations, domestically on American soil. So they had to have a reset. They had to say, okay, we admit we operated on American soil. We did all of these things. Yes. And now we're going to enter a new phase where we're more open. And what they did is they handed over everything to Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol was an up-and-coming, very clever. He's known as the grandfather of neoconservatism. He created modern neoconservatism that we see today. And from 1967 onwards, you see the reformation. They closed down Kissinger's international seminar at Harvard to train young global leaders, and they opened up in 1971 and 1972 the German Marshall Fund of the United States of America, which was run by Henry Kissinger's best mate, based at Harvard still. And that was going to now take over the training. But they were more open. The people who opened it up were people like David Rockefeller and people who were all linked with the establishment. They said, hey, all these former heads of the CFRs and stuff all came and said, we're opening up the German Marshall Fund of the United States. What are you going to do there? Oh, we're going to run non-governmental organizations out of here. They started creating things like USAID. They started to create these organizations that could be arms, that non-governmental development organizations that they could then go to do the next stage of their plans. They'd already economically, the Soviet Union was battered. It was completely battered. And America had changed their idea of how to combat mutually assured destruction, the idea that nuclear war will destroy everyone. What they decided is that they had to give nuclear technology to loads of different people. They gave some nuclear technology to China, Pakistan, India, South Africa. All of them get leaked nuclear technology so that more nukes can be created, more nuclear powers, and that's less likely that you're going to see just two countries attack each other because other countries could be involved. So suddenly the rules of the game were changing in 1967. They were focusing. The CIA were in charge of refocusing and aligning every single part of their operation to be conduit operations. They're separated by a couple of organizations. So USAID, everybody knows it's funded through CIA channels and the like, but it goes out and then it creates non-governmental organizations that go that link, like they're 2 degrees of separation from the CIA, and then they create organizations that then go to the Eastern Front, to where the lines of the Soviet Union and Europe are, and set up different organizations when they can within the countries and start the color revolutions. By 1989, you start to see color revolutions happen, and suddenly non-governmental organizations flooded into that part of the world. Every time, the first revolution that they had, which was Czechoslovakia in 1989, that they needed 50 to 150 non-governmental organizations attached to these CIA-funded arms to go in there to cause that revolution to happen. By the time it got to 2004 in Ukraine, they had in Ukraine 30,000 non-governmental organizations. to cause the coup, to cause the what happened in Ukraine. Suddenly, Ukraine changed politically from being pro-Russian because they're their bloody neighbors, and most people had relations and stuff with them, to suddenly being anti-Russian because there was loads of money, non-governmental organizations, a load of people being organized to take over politics itself. This was a running theme. So the CIA became like not only the CIA itself, but all of these non-governmental organizations, non-governmental development organizations, detached arms that you can no longer see as the CIA. And in the end, it's so confusing that no one really cares. They see these people act, and a lot of these people, then, the people who are pushing these buttons are people like George Soros, people like Irving Kristol, people like his son later, Bill Kristol, people who are neoconservatives. And so neoconservatives are used then by the CIA to cause fundamental revolutions all around the world. Now, recently, Elon Musk went in and he started cutting away at all of these organizations, cutting away at USAID, cutting away in the non-governmental organizations. But they weren't destroying them. They were reforming them. They were creating digital NGOs instead. That's what's happening. People are being told, oh, you're being freed from this system. We're resetting again, just like in 1967. Just like they did when they put the neoconservatives in charge in the first place. And if you go back in time to 1985, we go to Stanford University and we see a young Peter Thiel being given money and funding to open up the Stanford Review that starts off really the beginning of bringing in technocracy to an extent, literally like trying to push that ideology. That was funded by Irving Kristol. If you follow what Irving Kristol's been funding, the future and where we're going, we're like, oh, well, the CIA handed over power to the neoconservatives, detached their arms. Hamilton 68, the thing that was running through Twitter, that was censoring everybody, that was run by neoconservatives out of the German Marshall Fund, based at the Alliance for Security and Democracy, were based in the German Marshall Fund, and they were the ones who were running all the censorship and deciding who's censored. These organizations as well, a lot of the people who were involved with these organizations have major links with Israeli Unit 8200 companies and lots of other intelligence organizations. It must be mentioned that the CIA is not the only one. The CIA helped create when the CIA couped Chile in 1973, they helped create the Chilean version of the CIA. When they couped Egypt in 1952, they helped create the Egyptian version of the CIA. Where they go and they coup, they create their own infrastructure that looks like their own, that can then work with their own infrastructure, and it just becomes part of what is essentially globalism. What happened in 1967 as well? Klaus Schwab was sent home with the grandfather of nuclear theory and mutually assured destruction, Herman Kahn, the real Dr. Strangelove, and John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the most important men in American history, really responsible for so much, was sent back to create the World Economic Forum, which would eventually manufacture young global leaders that would be installed in all of these countries where coups were happening. They learned a very simple lesson early on. You can install someone like Nasser into Egypt after the 1952 coup, but at the end of the day, that movement can be co-opted by the opposite side. You need to make sure loyalty. You need complete loyalty. You need to make sure you train these people up yourself. You choose the leaders. You put them back in the country. So like my country, Britain, young global leaders for the World Economic Forum that was originally a CIA-funded program. The leaders that have been in charge since the first one, Tony Blair, David Cameron, the Labour leaders like Ed Miliband, Ed Balls, Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, all of them trained by a former CIA-funded program that's been disguised as being a friendly globalist institution because globalism is taken over. The CIA saw what globalism was and started creating it. Modern globalism we see today, the Peter Thiels, the World Economic Forum, the Elon Musk, they all came from the CIA fund. They all came from CIA roots. They're all CIA roots.
Wow. And Johnny, this is my last question, and I want to say thank you. It's amazing the way you explain this, and I'm pretty sure our subscriber will enjoy this. So the last question is, what evidence do you have that technocracy driven by Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, all those guys, is leading to a society without humanity?
I find it very. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for. I'm an extremely censored guy. I really appreciate the ability to speak to you, speak to your subscribers and your viewers. I'm happy to come on anytime and answer any questions that you may have. And I can only give my opinion. But I tell you what, 2009. That SpaceX Epstein funded program was really interesting. It's in synthetic genomics. The people who were running it were George Church and one of his buddies. They both involved very much in they're the grandfathers of modern genomics. You know, these people are very important. What they're looking at, what synthetic genomics, is they posit in this course from the very, very first part that very soon we're going to be able to manipulate cells as though they're a computer. So we could type into a keyboard to manipulate the cells inside of us. And they say the building blocks of that, during this course, the building blocks of that is what we've already discovered. This was 15, 16 years ago. A lot's happened since then. A lot happened. And AI is going to make this move very quickly. And what they were looking at was ways to incorporate things in the body. And in response, your body then becomes better. So and why not? If you could, this is a question I asked lots of people. When you look at your own beliefs on this, if someone come to you and said, I can inject something in you, or I don't even have to inject, I can wirelessly implant within you without your choice. Either I could do that, but I can give you an extra 150 years of prime life with all of your loved ones. You would be a fool to say no. There was no one on earth who would say no. I don't believe it. But the people who say, no, I would never do that. If you got down to the last moment where you looked in your child's eye, you'd be like, I want to stay here and I want to be with you. You know, this is the fact. And this is what they're looking at. They're looking at how to reprogram ourselves to be as though they were a computer. Now, on top of that, we look at the evidence of during the coronavirus, there were lots of scientific papers that come out that also backed up the idea of what is essentially synthetic genomics. I talked to a guy who used to be the head of Pfizer. And he told me when they were researching viruses and medication, really, back in the day, what they would do is they would look at the chemical compounds they could put together and what that does in the body. And by 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009, they had gone through everything. They had used computers to check the benefits of every single compound. What would that compound do? Now, what would that compound do? Now, what would that compound do? And they'd gone through all of them, all of the known compounds and known variations on Earth. They had realized they knew as best as they can using that technology, how to cure your headache or how to take away your stomach pain, but not fully. Of course, lots of things weren't discovered. And they knew they had to make a decision. They had to try a new technology. This technology is old. And they wanted to try mRNA technology. And that's a much different thing. And that is about the manipulation of cells. They tried to present it as being, oh, it's fine. It's just about, it's just a new thing, a new technology that we're using. But it also leads to other things. Messing around at that level is about the exchange of information and learning what that exchange of information. Your cell has information. When it wants to interact with another part of the cell, another cell, it exchanges information. They wanted to know how that exchange happened. And they wanted to watch that carefully because that will lead us onto something that's the next wave of technology. I'll leave you with this. This is a really important thing. In 1967, 1968, the man who went back with Klaus Schwab to help create the World Economic Forum was a man called Herman Kahn, who worked for the Hudson Institute. I was known as the real Dr. Strangelove. And in 1967, 1968, the State Department funded a program, a project that was called, led to a book called the Year 2000. And it predicted every single technology of the future. All of the technologies, you can go to a site called crummy.com and it'll show you every single one of those technologies that were predicted, which ones we've managed to reach, which ones we've almost got to, and which ones we're already at, we haven't reached yet. And what these people, these scientists start to do is start to tick off each one of these things. And we knew all of the future. Some of those things are liquid that will be injected in your body, that will be able to react with computers. What they worked out for the future is happening now. Is if you listen to what they're saying and the scientists are saying when they talk about this sort of stuff, it leads towards transhumanism, and that leads towards a war between humans and altered people. So there's much evidence of transhumanism. I would say for people to go back and look at the start, 1967, 1968, the year 2000, type that in, year 2000, Herman Kahn, go look for yourself what they looked at for the future, and then think about where we are now, and you will see that they're developing the technologies that change us from human beings to eventually just being robots. And we don't really understand what that means. That doesn't mean we're full of screws and we're full of engines and cogs. It means synthetic biology. The cells themselves can be programmed to never, ever die. Imagine that.
Johnny, and that's unstoppable, right?
You
can stop that.
Well, Herman Kahn, at the end of his book, explains that the future that we've got is so dangerous, so fundamentally hard to understand that it may not be, and this is what he says, it may not be humans who are the best people to solve the issues of our time and to stop catastrophe. And he suggests that we need computers to do that for us. And that's really the unstoppable part. We are handing over. We don't want to be responsible. That's one of the biggest problems with humanity. We don't want to take accountability. We don't want to take ownership. We don't want to take responsibility. If we can hand that over to a computer, to a machine, we will. And that will lead us down that road, whether we like it or not.
Wow. Well, Johnny, how can people can reach you? I know you have your website, the newspace.com, but I don't know if they can reach you on X. Can you invite them, please, and to go to your website and to your social media?
Indeed. Newspace.com is the best place to go. Type in Johnny Vedmore, at Johnny Vedmore into most things, and you will find me. X, I'm on a lot. I'm always interactive. If you DM me, I will respond to you. I try and remain being human.
Yeah, I know that. Well, Johnny, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
A pleasure.